So after all the drama of Jesus and these three disciples climbing up the mountain, and the amazing brilliance of Jesus, and the appearance of Moses and Elijah, and then Peter's confusion, then that's when the real drama begins. And it begins with this voice from the clouds that says, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." And so then with that simple command, all of the brilliance, all of the extra people, all of those surreal feelings were gone. The disciples head back down the mountain. Jesus tells them to keep their mouths shut until after the resurrection. And then they head towards the cross. So for just a moment, in that thin space, Jesus was revealed to them in all of his glory. And the disciples were given the grace to see what had always been there. And for those three who saw it, it gave them strength for the journey on. And it gave them a reason to listen. You know, most people have had some type of mountaintop experience. Very few have had visions of Moses and Elijah and Jesus in dazzling white clothes, although I'm sure there's a few. But most everybody has had something, even little things that were really important to you. But if somebody looked at them from the outside, they'd be like, well, what was so special about that? But it was your moment when you knew God's grace profoundly. And it's your reason to listen, your reason to head back down the mountain. Because anything that calls us out of ourselves and into relationship with Christ is one of those mountaintop experiences. And so as we head into the season of Lent, beginning this Wednesday, on Ash Wednesday, we're metaphorically heading down that mountain with the disciples. We've had the celebrations of Christmas and baptism and Epiphany, revealing Christ to the world, knowing the incarnation. And then today we get this glimpse of Jesus and all of his glory. And then it's suddenly gone. And we head back down the mountain, back down to the dust and the ashes and the everyday hurting world. But unlike those disciples, for some of us, those mountaintop experiences were a really long time ago. We really have to think back about that time when we saw that clear moment of God's grace and God's glory that was so strong that it called us outside of ourselves into that listening, into that being present. Or maybe we think we haven't had one at all, but most of us have. Even if it was something, as I said, that seemed insignificant from the outside. But the call comes to us all the same. As we head into this time of spring cleaning for our souls, we get the opportunity, or some would say the excuse, to do something different, to find room for new life and resurrection in our lives. And we listen. We all know there's different kinds of listening. We listen to a song we've heard 100 times on the radio very differently than a person who comes to us in need of help. We listen in a different way to our boss than we do to our toddlers. And we listen one way when we're taking notes in class and another when we're soaking in the sounds of nature. We know that there's all these different kinds of listening. And so when we think about God calling the disciples to listen, calling out of that cloud and telling the disciples, listen to Jesus. It wasn't just listen with your head and remember what's being said. It's not just listening to understand, okay, this is what I need to go do. But it's listening to be called outside of themselves and into the love of God, into relationship with Jesus. This is the way that love listens. And when we are in love with somebody, being Valentine's Day, right? We're all thinking about love this weekend. I guess it was yesterday, but you know what I meant. When we're in love with somebody, we listen to take their side, to truly understand and to be at peace with them. So when we listen to Jesus in love, we listen to take Jesus' side. It's like the classic candy bar story. You guys have probably heard this one before, but it's worth saying again. So there's this young, newly married couple, and her family had this silly tradition that if you went to the grocery store, that as you checked out, you got a grocery store prize. Started when the kids were young, or maybe when her parents were young, that with little kids, if you didn't have a meltdown at the grocery store, then you got a prize when you checked out. But she continued this on into her adulthood. And so she would go to the grocery store after work, and when she checked out, she would get herself a candy bar. And she always ended up doing the grocery shopping. And her husband noticed that there was always a candy bar wrapper in the car and asked where his candy bar was. And she would always reply that she had just gotten herself a grocery store prize. She didn't think anything of it. And he would always say, well, he wanted a grocery store prize, and she thought that he was teasing because he obviously had not been to the grocery store. And so she would say, well, you should go grocery shopping. And so this kind of went on, and it intensified and intensified until the point that she started saying, well, you can do the grocery shopping then. And he didn't want to do the grocery shopping. And so they got so entrenched in getting the other person to see their side instead of seeing the other person's side that they completely stopped listening. And it got to the point that things were not going well, and nobody had gone grocery shopping for 2 weeks. So both of them were complaining about their situation at their respective workplaces. And at each place, an older, wiser person helped them understand how to listen with love. The woman was complaining, and the guy at the next desk finally asked, why is it such a big deal? Why can't you just get him a candy bar? She said, I'd be glad to get him a candy bar. I'd be glad to get him a whole box of candy bar, but he never asked for a candy bar. He said he wanted a grocery store prize, as if my grocery shopping isn't good enough for him. And he laughed and said, I'll bet you $100 that he just sees your candy bar wrapper and wants a candy bar. And across town, the husband was also complaining. And the woman in the break room finally asked him, why is it so hard for you to stop at the gas station and buy yourself a candy bar? And he said, well, that wouldn't be a problem, but I don't understand why she is so selfish that if she's getting a treat for herself, that she won't get one for me too. And she laughed and said, I doubt that it has anything to do with that. I'm guessing she's hungry from a long day at work, and since she's put in the extra effort to stop at the grocery store, she needs a snack. And it doesn't occur to her to get you a snack because you're at home where there's already food in the fridge. Just stop and get gas on the same night that she gets groceries and get something for yourself, a gas station prize. So that night on the way home, she stopped at the grocery store and bought an entire box of candy bars, and he stopped at the gas station and did the same thing. And they laughed for years about this house overflowing with candy bars as they learned how to listen to each other. And that listening with love, listening to take the other person's side, is how God is calling us to listen to Jesus. We're called to take the time to really see, to really understand the world through God's eyes, to listen to where the world needs to hear God's love, to listen to how God is trying to bring healing and new life to whatever situation is in your life right now. And listen of the promise of the resurrection, which changes all the meaning of the ashes and the dust and the brokenness that we walk back down the mountain to see. Because it makes it into something holy, something that is being made new and whole in God's love. So this week, as we remember our mountaintop experiences, as we hear again this invitation to listen, to hear the world from Jesus' point of view, may you find courage to see the grace of Lent and the hope of the resurrection and the peace which sends you out into the world in love. Amen.